Joining us now, House of Delegates member Kirk Cox, Colonial Heights. Kirk's also former Majority Leader, former Speaker of the House, and he's with us now. Mr. Speaker, great to have you with us, sir.
I have to tell you before we start on the governor's thing that you were spot on with your Astro analysis after you got crushed 14-7. We thank you for Garrett Cole. That was very nice of you. I'll 8-2 start, but I got to tell you, I've been really impressed with Joseph. I watched your videos, and I figured out a scenario in which you will be wearing a Yankee hat in a few years, if you would like to know.
What? Tell me this scenario.
Sure, I will.
A Yankees hat.
And your misguided Astro loyalty will finally end. And I was actually looking through my Yankee hat collection today, and like I said, look, I was a baseball coach for years. I love throwing at the first pitch. Your son's impressive. I watched the video. So when he, unlike you, wants to sign with the real team that's won 27 world championships and dons that hat, that Yankee hat, and will be beside him, and you will be forced to be beside him with that Yankee hat. So just want to lay that future scenario out to you. And
it is, you know what? If there was anything that would make me become a Yankee fan and put that NY hat on, which I absolutely loathe, it would be if he got signed to a professional contract in their organization. Yes, I would come to your house in Colonial Heights, and you'd pick me out. You pick me out a hat, and I'd have to wear it to become a Yankees fan, right? I'd have to do it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I've not been as excited as anything. This run for governor is exciting, but for you to wear a Yankee hat might top that.
Well, I tell you what, I went into the season kind of excited about it because the Yankees didn't have their closer. He wasn't playing. Chapman's out, and your big pitcher's out. And I was gloating over it. It was kind of sad because, it's like, okay, Chapman doesn't want to play. The hell with him. I can't stand them anyway. Severino's out for the season. He got Tommy John. And I'm like, I think we're going to beat him again and win the whole thing. 1 week into the season, Verlander's out for the season, gone. 3 days after that, our closer, Osuna, he's got Tommy John. He's gone. And now we've got 10 rookies in the bullpen. And our ace pitcher, Greinke, his fastball is 79 miles an hour. So that's kind of what we're stuck with now. He has 9 changeups or something. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, great to have you on. I'm going to get to your governor's race in a minute, but I want to start with the special session coming up on August 18th and what you think of that. What is supposed to get accomplished there? What does the governor want? What do Republicans want?
Well, frankly, the Democrats have said very little, but I think you'll see 2 or 3 things out of them. A fairly radical, especially anti-law enforcement agenda. I think we've seen that coming, and I think that will be devastating. The one thing that you see probably more from people, the harshest reaction, I think the president's addressed this, is they just don't recognize our country, and frankly, even Virginia, with this chaos in the streets. And boy, to even think about legislation that would move felony penalties for assaulting a police officer, misdemeanors, and dramatically cutting funding when you need to be going the opposite direction. That will be one issue. Trying to obviously deal with the budget, and me and you talk a lot about that. So that's another issue. But John, I guess I'm upset about is I've heard nothing from the governor and the Democrats about K-12. How do we open K-12? I mean, how do we help that process along and give these localities the assurance that we're going to be leaders in that? And not a peep. I'm not even sure they're going to put K-12 in a procedural resolution. And I would tell you that's one of the most important issues that we face.
I thought Hanover County did it right. Hanover County basically saying, we're going to leave it up to the parents. We're going to have in-person school 5 days a week in classroom where you're going to be able to learn. And so if you want to send your child K-12 to school to learn as a parent, you can do that. And it'll be 5 days a week, and it's not a hybrid. It's school like we know it, right? But if you don't want to do that, if you're afraid of your child getting COVID or you're just not comfortable with it or whatever reason during this pandemic, we're going to allow students to opt out of in-classroom school and go to a virtual learning process. And we're going to take the teachers that don't want to teach in school and put them in charge of the Zoom classes because that solves everything. And I thought Hanover had the model correct. Why has no one else followed that? And then the school board in Hanover has come under fire for doing that, and they've been mobbed on social media and everything else. Why can't that be the model?
Actually, the city of Colonial Heights, which I represent, is doing exactly the same thing. They have a choice option between 5 days and virtual, which is the way it should be for parents, as you said. I think one of the reasons you don't see it is because the governor's shown no leadership. Some school systems are afraid of lawsuits and liability. They do need probably some more help in school opening, and we've shown no leadership there.
Right.
And so that's part of it. But to your point, Kerry Coyner and Siobhan Donovan and I wrote an editorial in the Times-Dispatch saying exactly what you said. Colonial Heights has a 52-page, really responsible plan. They thought of everything, how you do lunches, how you do cohorts. And that's what we need. And it's very doable, and it's essential. And you know this. I taught for 30 years, and you just can't calculate when especially kids, from a poverty background or out of school, it's disastrous. They fall a year behind in reading, which is essential. A lot of times both their parents work. Let's face it, sometimes they're home alone. They don't have computer access. We're not talking enough about that. And so cities like Colonial Heights and counties like Hanover have it right. And I'm hoping that some of these big systems, and Chesterfield would be one, et cetera, will soon reverse course. And there's going to be a lot of pushback, John, come September, I can tell you.
So far, I'm shocked that I haven't seen it. I really thought, one of the early polls that came out said that 58% of parents in America wanted their children to go to school. But what happens is this social media mob now that basically goes on and shames everybody. A couple parents speak out on Facebook, and they immediately get shamed that, they're putting their children at risk, and then everybody backs down, and they don't want to get involved with that. So I'm not sure if there's a silent majority, but the more parents that I just talked to, like bumping into them at a baseball tournament like I am here in Cary or whatever, they're outraged with the fact that their kids don't have the opportunity in some of these areas to get an education. Richmond, case in point, they canceled school until January. They've been out. If you're in Richmond, you haven't been in school since the 2nd of March. So that's 9 months. That's basically an entire year of school in a city with a 30% high school dropout rate. How the hell does that help kids in Richmond?
It doesn't at all, and they're great points. I addressed there's a group in Virginia Beach, 20,000 strong. There are 4 school openings, so those groups are right there, John. They don't always get the press
right
they should get. There are many teachers that really want to go back. I would have been in that situation. I'd have been, frankly, itching to go back because I can tell you when I'm in the classroom and you deal with kids, and I coached, you know when things are going off the rails. You know when you can immediately address some of those things. And I don't know. It was one thing going to Zoom and going to an online platform in the spring when you knew your kids. Now, think about this as a teacher. Now in September, you don't even know this cohort of kids. And that's really difficult to figure out where they're at, how you can help them. And to your point, in cities like Richmond, I'll take third grade reading, which is just essential. So you take a kid that probably got almost no instruction back in the spring when everyone was struggling with their platforms, and probably is now looking, to your point, at January at the earliest before he can get that really, or she can get that great reading instruction. That is disastrous. You just never catch up from that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm extremely worried.
I just got to say, it's a sick situation as far as I'm concerned, that these kids aren't going to school, and now you've got a state senator in Illinois and Chicago saying that he's put a bill in to stop teaching history. It's like, I don't know when I'm going to wake up from this nightmare that is going on with the left. All right, let's get to your gubernatorial run. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with House of Delegates member from Colonial Heights, Kirk Cox, Republican. Kirk also former Speaker of the House, former Majority Leader when Bill Howe was a Speaker. He's been around a long time, running for governor in 2021. Now, when we look at Kirk Cox and your record, there were 2 things, Kirk, that you and I were very united on, and I think you made 2 great, bold, courageous decisions in both times, but some are going to take you to task over it. And let me just go over what they are, and we'll go from there. Number one, in 2013, you were a leading proponent, like me, of passing the tax increase in Virginia for our roads. Now, we had put no money in the Virginia transportation system for 40 years. As a result of that, you couldn't get from point A to point B. That came under fire from the Tea Party and a lot of other people. I was the biggest cheerleader for that. Most brilliant tax increase ever that passed, the combination of that, gas taxes, and others. Because I got to tell you, Kirk Cox, now, anybody that goes from Virginia Beach along that Golden Corridor, if you will, or the Crescent to Washington, D.C., so far it's cut an hour and a half off that. And when it's all done, it's going to be 2 hours. Before that, you couldn't get anywhere. Secondly, we need to have the same thing for 81. So that's number one. The second thing you're going to be criticized over, which I agreed with you 100%, was passing Medicaid expansion, because these are for working people that were falling through the insurance gap. Many of them Trump backers. That's why I was so in favor of it. So these are the two things that make up your core legacy. It's going to come under fire from some elements of the party. How do you reconcile that with Tea Party members and others?
Yeah, I'll address the transportation first, and I think you know this well. You said it well. I mean, we had tremendous transportation needs, and that point, I thought we had to step up. Infrastructure is key for business, et cetera. But let me say this also. When you look at Kirk Cox's 31 years, there's not a more hawk on taxes. I mean, that is, I blocked $2 billion for the tax increases as Speaker. So I'm more than happy to argue my record on that. Medicaid expansion, let's all go back and remember that was tied to the budget and probably would have shut the budget down. But having said this, here was my goal. My goal was to try to come up with a Mike Pence, Indiana-type model that had a work requirement and that had a kill switch. And the kill switch is 90% federal funded, 10% state funded. If that didn't happen, it goes away. And I thought that was the right thing to do. But once again, let me say this. You know, a key issue, I think, for so many of our people, are obviously Second Amendment 2A. So who was the guy when he was Speaker that shut down that session that would have passed a lot of terrible gun control legislation? And I was the actual Speaker at that point that did that. And I know this is something the President has done such a good job of. Why do we have the number one business ranking in the state? CNBC said partially because of the 25% cut in some big agencies and regulations that I pushed through. And I will say this, John, if you look over the last 20 years, and the reason why this state was in such good shape when I was Speaker, and we had a $1.2 billion surplus, I would say it's because of the conservative leadership in the House of Delegates. Let me remind people I was both whip, majority leader, and Speaker during that era.
I stood with you on both of these key issues. I thought you were spot on with the transportation package, and anybody that's driving on a highway in Virginia now, except 81, that's got to be dealt with. But if you drive on any highway in Virginia right now, and you were here in 2010, 2011, 2012, and you look at the difference in roads, bridges, just the ease of being able to get in and out of places. I mean, without that, you wouldn't have had any of these improvements to transportation. And so, look, it's easy to be at the head of the Tea Party and sit there and say, oh, this was the biggest tax increase ever, blah, blah, blah. You know, what it's tougher to do is say, we had no infrastructure, we had no bridges, we had no roads, and now we do, and you have to pay for those. And you paid for it now with deficit spending. You paid for it the right way. And as far as Medicaid expansion is concerned, I think you're spot on. I think you did the right thing. And now we have the Indiana model. And has anybody complained about that? Is it working the way it was meant to work? It is, right? So exactly what you said you wanted to do, you were able to do, and now it's working like it is in Indiana. So, I mean, it's tough to argue when things work. Roads got built, and Medicaid expansion has the work requirement behind it, and the other end switch. So both things you passed are now working. What's the beef?
The one thing I would really fight for is, as you know, the governor reneged on his promise on work requirements. So that is something, as governor, I would very, very much work for. But, you know, and I'll just reemphasize this. I mean, I have an A rating with the NRA. I mean, if you look at my conservative credentials, twice Family Foundation Legislator of the Year, I'm very proud of that. It stands up to anybody that's running.
There's going to be several people in this race. Amanda Chase, Senator Chase from Chesterfield has already announced. You're likely to get, I guess, Ben Chafin, State Senator, Southwest Virginia. Very likely to get Pete Snyder, Northern Virginia, who's done the Virginia 30-Day Fund. Why should Kirk Cox be the nominee, and how do you win in that sort of an environment, whether it's a convention or a primary? How do you win?
Several things. You're going to have to be, if it's a Terry McAuliffe or frankly almost any Democrat, you're going to have to be able to raise a lot of money. It's the reality of politics. I raised about $8.5 million in the last cycle. And, you know, some of the articles that came out when I had said I'm seriously considering governor pointed that out. I think that's absolutely crucial. Number two, I do think you need to have really led in a leadership position. I mean, really been through the wars. And blocked a lot of key things, but also put some key initiatives in. The towns I have worked across the aisle, and the Online Virginia Network, which is crucial. I mean, to your point, I mean, a lot of times talk about Liberty and what a great job they do. We're not doing that in the public sector. I read an editorial with Luke Torian on how we move that forward. So I think that's another really big thing that obviously I bring to the table. But, John, don't forget, I have the bluest seat, most Democratic seat after a federal judge gerrymandered the lines in Virginia, and I won in that district. And I think that says a lot, that I can basically hold conservative values. I will fight for those, but I can also lead us forward on some of the key issues we're going to have to look at in higher ed and K-12. I don't think anyone has a better veterans record than I do with over 120 pieces of legislation. So, you know, I prayed and thought really hard about this, and hopefully you can tell from the enthusiasm in my voice. I'm pumped up. I really feel like that, you know, I can deliver and can be a really effective governor for the people of Virginia.
All right, so let me ask you this. Do you have a preference, Mr. Speaker? Is the nominating process is via convention or primary?
I've always been more of a primary person. I think you've sort of looked at the conventions that we've had. They end up being very divisive. That's not going to influence my decision. I'm running either way, but I do think you get a better cross-section, obviously, when you have a primary.
Conventions are a catastrophe. They have torn the soul and the heart out of the Republican Party of Virginia, and as long as we continue to have these conventions and allow them to get rigged, as long as we continue to do hand-to-hand combat and have Bonnie and Clyde hire people on campaign staffs that are unit chairs, poisoning the process, the Republican Party is going to continue, Virginia is going to continue to be a complete joke. So everybody knows where I stand. I am opposed to conventions, period. And until somebody stands up and says just stop them, you know, we're going to continue in this situation. Hopefully the gubernatorial statewide nominating contest will be via a primary where people can actually go and vote for the candidate of their choice, not these stupid conventions which absolutely abhor. There's no one who can come on and debate this with me and tell me that conventions have done anything but destroy the party. Mr. Speaker, I got to go. Best of luck in your gubernatorial run, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, John.